Pour un gars d'ici, être le directeur de général des Canadiens est une occasion d'une vie.
Enjoy the moment, that you're in the NHL here.
Working for the Montreal Canadiens is a dream. La plus grande franchise dans la histoire du hockey.
If it was my last day on this planet, and you told me what would you like to do, I want to be in that building on a Saturday night.
All right, guys, welcome to the show. Welcome to Habs votre émission de hockey hebdomadaire, interactive et 100% bilingue, focused on the Montreal Canadiens. No hot takes, no fake hype, just real talk. Pas de sensationnalisme, pas de rumeurs débiles, juste des analyses franches, réfléchies et bien sourcées. We love the Habs, but we're not here to drink the Kool-Aid. We've got sharp takes, not cheap ones. So if you're looking for a smarter way to talk Habs, sans le bruit, sans le bordel, vous êtes au bon endroit. This is Habs Therapy Day. Let's get into it, guys. I'm really excited today. We have a very, very special guest. I'm really excited to talk to this guy, Marco D'Amico. Most of you will know who he is. He's a senior writer and editor at RG, covering hockey and the Montreal Canadiens. RG, if you don't know, is a great source for news on not just the Canadiens, but sports in general. It's a U.S.-based sports media platform. It employs a research and data-driven approach to reporting sports news, which means the news that you get is accurate and well-sourced and based on information about the latest developments in the sports world. Marco himself is an accredited member of the Montreal Canadiens media. He's a rising star. We've seen a lot of stuff from him of late, and he's been doing a fantastic job reporting the news for us fans. He has a real knack for breaking news in a responsible and informative way, which is why I particularly like his work. His commitment to journalistic standards and keeping things real is something that I really appreciate. He earns his engagement with hard work and reporting, not with far-fetched rumors and sensationalized headlines. Marco's work has been featured on TSN, RDS, CBC. In addition to his written work at RG, you can catch him weekdays with Sean Starr on YouTube. Also a must-watch for Habs fans. I think you should definitely check it out. He's a graduate of Concordia University, has a bachelor and a master's degree in history. And we're really, really happy to have him. And I'm super glad that he's here. And welcome to the show, Marco. Thanks so much for joining us.
Oh, it's a pleasure for having me, and thank you for the readout. I didn't know you had peeped my my LinkedIn profile as well.
Well, I like to, like you, I like to do my research, and I like to be informed and make sure I got my ducks in a row before we get started. I also think, because of sort of the content of what I'd like to talk about today, I think it's important to kind of know where you're coming from, because I do want to ask you a little bit about sort of your perspective and where you see the Canadiens rebuild from the perspective of a media member who perhaps gets to see some things that we don't get to see every day as fans.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so that's kind of what I'm a bit of a rebuild junkie, and I think you are too. From what I've seen from you, I think you find the inner workings of this stuff fascinating as I do, which I think is what really led me to ask you to be on the show. I think in a lot of ways the rebuild is misunderstood by a lot of people, whether it's fans or the media. And maybe not misunderstood, but often we forget about it, right? We get caught up in cheering, and we sort of forget that there's a long-term plan here, and it's not necessarily about winning today's game, or even tomorrow's game, or even this season. There's a lot going into this rebuild, and it's not just about roster building. I don't want to talk to you about who's going to be the second line center next year, or who's going to partner with Lane Hudson. I mean, obviously those are important things, but I think those things have been talked about a lot. So maybe before we get right into everything, maybe you can tell us. I mean, I've done a bit of an intro on you. Maybe you can tell me what it looks like from your perspective to be an accredited media member for the Canadiens. Are you at the rink every day? Do you go to the games? Do you get to the dressing room? What is your behind the scenes involvement with the Canadiens? How close are you to the inner workings of all this?
Yeah, so I don't normally attend practices. I do go to all the games. and as of this season, also access to, players and post games and whatnot. So definitely, part of the beat in that sense, but not in the traditional sense. And I think that, if you look at the media right now, the way that the Canadians are kind of set up, there's kind of the traditional media that follows them at every step, and then there's the non-traditional media where you're not 100% dedicated to every step of the way, but covering the bigger points, and doing more with your time than the travel and the back and forth. So there's a little bit of a hybrid going on right now with a lot of people, myself included, where you can kind of pick and choose. But again, like, there are so many outlets covering the Canadians that at some point in time there's too many.
Yeah.
And so, even for the Canadians themselves, it's who do you let in? What kind of conversations do we have? What kind of content are we going to push forth? And so on and so forth. So I feel like it's very similar in that sense, when it comes to the way that I apply myself or the way that I pick and choose my situations. Obviously, going to the games, talking to the players after the games is fun. Going to practices is fun when you can. But obviously, the early time, the back and forths, and if you were at the game last night and you already have a full-time job outside of hockey, and you have to go to practice the next morning, when you get home at midnight, 12:30, and if there's a winter storm, maybe 1:30. So sometimes it's a little difficult to balance the whole thing. So it's mostly about that pick and choose.
Yeah, and it's another thing I didn't point out. Marco, by the way, guys, has a full-time job, so all of the stuff he's doing here is in addition. So it's even more impressive that he's able to do the stuff that he does. I won't call it a part-time job because I think it's probably more than that, but it's on the side. Yeah, it's not paying all your bills.
Those are definitely two full-time jobs. I would very much say.
Yeah.
It's just, you got to make time for it. You got to properly plan, and you're able to push forth. And that's the advice I've given everybody else, is just don't put your eggs in one basket when it comes to this stuff.
Yeah, I definitely get that vibe from you that you're a guy who has things planned out pretty well and pretty well organized, and has his shit together. Let's put it that way. So no, I think it's important to understand all of that. So let's get into the rebuild a little bit. One of the things that I find really, really interesting, and I think it's probably one of the more important aspects of the rebuild, is the idea of culture and identity. We hear a lot of people talking about that, whether it's the players, the coaches, the management, the staff. They talk about developing a culture, developing a camaraderie amongst the team. What I like to call an esprit de corps, right? Everyone working towards a common goal. Kent Hughes, one of Kent Hughes's favorite lines, he likes to talk about having an entire organization pulling in the same direction. What have you observed as a media member, somebody who has a little bit more access than we do? What have you been able to observe, and what are your thoughts on the environment that the team has created through this rebuild?
I mean, I came in just as this new regime kind of took hold. So that was around the same time that I started on the beat and covering the team from an accredited perspective. And I could only say from the stories that I've heard before, but there's definitely a different aura around the team, where obviously with low expectations up until this year, things were a little light. Everything was kind of always in a positive direction, despite the results on the ice not being such. The focus is on the future, the focus on watching the younger players develop. So to me, I found it to be healthier. I found it to be inviting to a degree. And I think it makes it easier for a younger guy like me that's starting to be like, hey, I'm coming into this, and, it's not the rabid kind of high expectations, high octane situation that we've seen in the past, where, it was results driven. And if you don't get those results, then you have to be the awkward group of individuals to walk into that room and start questioning the players as to why they couldn't get it done.
Right.
So those haven't happened yet. And I assume that things will go up a few degrees in the room when when the Canadians get to the point where there are going to be expectations on them. So for me, it was really easy to get at ease with it and the process with it. I think the other thing I would say is that the players themselves are very aware of where they're at in their environment. Like, it's not a shock. It's not a problem. They know that there's going to be many media members that want to talk to them. They know they're going to have to answer the tough questions. They know all that. And so when it comes time to talking to them plainly, they're quite generous with their time. And very rarely do you get like these shortcut answers. They take the time to answer the questions. Sometimes, even if the questions are a little out there, or even if the questions take 30 to 40 seconds to be answered, and they sit there and they wait and they ponder on the answer, they give you what you want or what you need to do your job. And I think at the same time, the media has given them the space to do theirs. So I think there's a healthy relationship so far. But I always say it's easy in these times to be give and take. It's a whole different story when you're going to be a competitive team vying for a Stanley Cup and you run into your first 4 to 5 game losing streak. That's going to be a different story.
And what about the players themselves? This camaraderie that we hear about, and of course, this summer we've seen, the players going to each other's weddings and going to concerts together and being on the ice, and practicing together. This camaraderie. I know I talked to fan bases, people from other fan bases, and they kind of laugh at it a little bit. Oh yeah, whatever. Everybody says that. But are you able to observe from your perspective the interaction between the players and the camaraderie? Like, is there? I mean, we hear people talk about tight dressing rooms, but my sense is that from listening to the guys, that there's more than that there. There's a special feeling there a little bit. Is that real, or is that something that's being made up? Can you speak on that at all, or are you close enough to them to see that any more than we would be as fans?
Yeah, I think there's definitely a camaraderie. I think that when you have Nick, Cole Caulfield intentionally take less money than Nick Suzuki on his contract, just so that he doesn't break bank, I think that's very telling. Slavkovsky did the exact same thing.
Right.
Noah Dobson took less to come to Montreal, right? Was asking for 10 million, ended up signing for 9.5 in Montreal because he wanted to be there and he wanted to be part of that culture. And I think the message is already out there. I don't think you really have to be someone that works on the Canadiens beat to know this. I think that there is a certain level of culture being built in Montreal that is extremely attractive to players right now across the league. And it's not like the Montreal of old, where it was kind of my way or the highway. It's not, if you want loyalty, get a dog type thing. You're not going to get any of that here.
Yeah.
I feel like everyone kind of single files and ranks within the team. I've spoken to various players off the record that have said they wanted to stay here long term, that have pointed out that a lot of the reason is because of the culture around the team and wanting to stay here. I mean, Jake Evans, same concept. Right. Jake Evans' camp was looking for somewhere in the high threes or even 4 million on his contract. Ended up signing for 2.8 because he wanted to stick around so much. That speaks to culture. That speaks to what they're building around the team and the fact that they're willing to go to war for each other. And then, you see the way that Ivan Demidov was treated the moment he arrived and how he's kind of been able to be around everybody this summer, attending everyone's weddings and practicing with players every day, sometimes twice a day. You can laugh about it from other fan base, and that's fine. People will review online. There's nothing new about that. But from a Montreal Canadiens perspective, and really from a overall NHL perspective, it's quite unique what you're seeing right now, and it's okay to point it out.
Yeah, and I mean, for me, the reason, like I said, I think this is one of the very important aspects of the rebuild. Even as much as the roster building aspect of things, and as long as that sense of esprit de corps and camaraderie exists, I think that this rebuild will continue to move in the right direction. I mean, obviously, Kent Hughes and Jeff Gorton need to make the right moves, and there's no doubt about that. And scouting and development has to be correct. But I think that as long as these guys have that environment where they love to show up to the rink every day, I think that that's things will move in the right direction.
Absolutely. I mean, look, I say absolutely because they are in the right direction. Now it's going to be the crux moves, as I call them. So getting that second line center, having the necessary top end secondary scoring, having the right pieces on your bottom pair that can play in special teams. There's all these different roster builds that you really have to worry about as a general manager. But on ice, I feel like core-wise, they've acquired the necessary pieces to move forward. So now it's simply just a question of watching them grow and ensuring that they're given the resources to get to the ceilings that these general managers think their players are capable of reaching.
Yeah, I agree completely. I mean, it's like I said. I mean, there's it's going to be different to see how these guys are when things maybe aren't going as great. But I mean, it's obviously a pretty positive thing, and it's been. I mean, it's been one of the best times for me to be a Canadiens fan, to watch these guys. This summer has been fantastic. You touched on it a second ago, a little bit about the financial side of things, about Caulfield and Slavkovsky taking less, Dobson taking less to be a part of this group and part of this culture. You know, Going along with that is this, so-called internal cap that we hear that Kent Hughes tried to establish. I think that's kind of gone out the window a little bit with the salary cap going up. But I guess what is it naive to believe that players will continue to take less to stay here? Like Lane Hutson, obviously, is the big news now, but Ivan Demidov is going to be, looking for a new contract not too far down the road as well. And there's going to be a lot of these young players who, if they turn into the players that we expect them to be, they're potentially going to have big paydays. Is it naive as fans to expect that the players will put such a value on remaining part of this culture that they're going to take less so that they can stick together as a group for longer term? As opposed to sort of what we see in Toronto, for example, where you've got four guys who were making over $12 million, and they kind of sort of price themselves out of the market. Is it naive or reasonable for us to expect that these guys will take a little bit less so that they can stay together in the long term?
I think it's naive to think that they would take what was considered to be less a year ago or a year or two ago. The cap is going up in a significant way. I feel like they will take less than where the market is going, but I don't think fans should be surprised if you see some of these guys signing for numbers that may raise an eyebrow if you're basing yourself on the salary cap situation of a year or two ago. And I think that's the key, right? So like internal salary structure, that's not happening. Like it happened with a Slavkovsky or a Caulfield because frankly they were not better than Nick Suzuki or more valuable than Nick Suzuki at the time of his signing. Neither of them had played a full season and gotten a 60-point pace at that point, and so one or the other just doesn't line up. And then the other thing you have to factor in, especially when it comes to where we're going with this now, is that Noah Dobson signed as a RFA with 1 year left, 7 years of unrestricted free agency as a right shot D, having had a 70-point season the year prior. So way more leverage than any of those players named. And then you look at a guy like Lane Hutson signing. I mean, Lane Hutson had more points in his rookie season than, and even from a point per game status than Nick Suzuki had in the first 3 years of his entry level contract. So and he's a defenseman. So there's a very different scenario here where these are better players. So there's no, Nick Suzuki was maybe the totem pole during a flat cap era because he was the team's best player. But I don't think at the end of either, Hudson or Demidov's contract that would necessarily be the same once we get there. It won't be the same reality. So you have that. You have the salary cap going up by about 25% over the next 3 years. That changes the dynamic consistently. But do I think that guys like Lane Hutson or Ivan Demidov are going to be trendsetters? No, I don't. I think that they'll still be under what the going rate for the players of their ilk would go for.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's I maybe made a mistake in prefacing the question by talking about the internal cap, because I think you're right. I mean, I think the Nick Suzuki standard just doesn't make sense to anybody anymore. And I mean, the suggestion that these guys are going to agree to get to go for under $8 million a year, but I guess is it and I think your answer is yes. It is reasonable to expect that a guy like Lane Hutson will put value on the idea of staying in Montreal, as far as he'll value that, and there is a value in that, in him staying here, and that'll sort of play a role in how he negotiates his contract, whether it's the dollar amount or the term. And maybe the term is more important, frankly, at this stage. Is he a guy who, is going to want to be here for 8 years? I mean, or 7, I guess, if he signs, next year. Or is he a guy who's going to look to, to bridge and then, get a payday after 3 or 4 years? So, I don't know. I just I feel like I feel that in my heart a little bit from what I hear. Like when he won when he won the Calder Trophy, every interview he did started with, how much of an honor it is to be in Montreal and how much he loves it here. But on the other hand, I feel like maybe I'm being a little naive to think that, his agent is going to sit in a boardroom across the table from Kent Hughes and put a lot of weight into that. And, I wonder what your thoughts on it are. And obviously, I think, getting in there to Kent, he's not going to, take less than Nick Suzuki, but is he going to put any value on that at all?
I would say,
like, are they driving? Are they playing hardball with each other? Like, are they going to sit there? I don't think they're playing hardball. And I mean, it drives me crazy when I hear Tony Marinaro talk about how the Canadiens are driving a hardball bargain with because I mean, that's just not the word we're getting from either side.
I mean, listen, Tony has a viewpoint on it, and I respect it, and that it is all up to him in terms of how he wants to present it, and I think he deserves the platform to be able to do so. What I can say from what I know is that the two sides aren't playing hardball. In fact, they're just talking. Yeah. They're waiting to see how the chips fall. This is a new era where we have not seen a comparable player sign a contract like the one that Lane Hutson would like to sign. And so there is no rush on the Canadiens' end. Luke Hughes is going to be the contract to watch because he is the most similar player in the exact same situation as Lane Hutson, a 10.2C RFA that can't get offer sheeted, has no arbitration, etc. So none of that impacts it. So you look at a guy like Luke Hughes, what's he going to sign in New Jersey? And I think then that will start the benchmark conversation for Lane Hutson because, as I've reported, you had Frank Saravalli throw out Brock Faber's number of $8.5 million. I'm sure the Canadiens would love to sign him to an 8-year, $8.5 million. But the reality is that agents do not negotiate based on AAV. They negotiate, especially with a cap rising as much as it is now, with the percentage of the cap that a player occupies. And so if you look at Brock Faber, when Brock Faber's deal kicked in July, his $8.5 million counts for 8.9% of the salary cap. Yeah. Well, the salary cap is going to go up to $104 million next summer. What's 8.9% of that? $9.25 million.
Yeah. Yeah.
So if you're Hudson's cap, you realistically should be pushing for that number. The Canadiens obviously are going to be pushing more towards the 8.5, and the conversation is there. But if we're really talking, about a $600,000-$700,000 difference, like this will. And again, there's no hardball taking place if you're talking about a less than 10% difference. It's just a difference of opinion based on where the salary cap is going. And they see it one way, the other one sees it the other. Let the market dictate where things are going, and then they'll just come back to the table and find a middle ground, and that's it.
Yeah, Saravalli actually did a great interview with Jeff Gorton, I don't know, about a couple months ago, where they talked about this AAV versus percentage of the cap, and Gorton had some pretty interesting thoughts on it. And I mean, he's always kind of tongue-in-cheek a little bit, but he gave some pretty good insight on where he comes from that perspective. So let's move on a little bit to scouting and development. I think that's another huge important aspect of this rebuild, any rebuild really, is that, you have to have the right people in place to do the scouting. And then, once you do get your players in, you need to have the right people to develop them. And one of the things I found really interested in the last few years is that how out front the scouting and development guys are. Like, I mean, 5-10 years ago, you would have never known who was playing Adam Nicholas's role, right? Some, skills coach, we would have never known who that person was. We would never known who Rob Ramage was. We would have never, we know Rob Ramage because of his hockey career, but, as far as his role within the organization, we wouldn't really know who Nick Bobrov is, all these guys. What type of, I think this is one of the areas where the Canadiens have really, really done well. As far as, scouting, developing, getting the right guys, whether it's because of their skills and their talents, but also because of sort of, there appears to be a profile, psychological profile that they like as well. What kind of role from what you see from your sort of inside position? What kind of role do you see these guys playing in the success of the rebuild? Whether it's the scouting guys like Bobrov and Lapointe and those guys, or whether it's the development guys like Adam Nicholas and Rob Ramage and Pellerine and those guys. Are they? I mean, they appear to play a very big role from what I can see. Do you see it the same way?
Yeah, well, they play a big role because there was no one playing that role per se at the time with the last with the last regime. You just look at their analytics department. The Canadiens had a part-time guy running their analytics department, whereas now they have Christopher Boucher, who's absolutely excellent with his models. That has two other employees under him running that. You look at the Department of Development, which did not exist. They had Rob Ramage and Frankie Bouillon at the time, but now, as you point out, you have Adam Nicholas, you have Mario Leblanc was a video coach as well. I believe they brought somebody else in for that now. So they have way more resources plugged into the developmental side. Now, when it comes to looking at, scouting as it is, having Bobrov has definitely helped them with the Russian circles, whether or not fans agree with the Michkov no draft or not. This is probably one of the more plugged in, I would say, scouts. So if they didn't take him, there are a multitude of reasons that I would not want to get into that probably push them to not go in that direction. And obviously with eyes on Ivan Demidov, which is understandable as well. So that has helped him on that. And I feel like in that sense, it's kind of alleviated and diversified the role for a guy like Martin Lapointe, who's been able to kind of focus in on and look for diamonds, kind of like these diamonds in the rough, guys that are bigger, that have that skill that you don't necessarily see coming from a mile away. But then when they get there, you're like, oh, like a Florian Jacki that was initially seen as like a Nepo pick, and now no one's kind of questioning that. Yeah. You look at a guy like Tyler Thorpe. One guy I really liked, Hayden Papanikis. They had good words to say about either of these guys. So I like the vision, the diversification, and I like that although they do want to get big, they're also willing to throw like serious darts at players with skill, like a guy like LJ Mooney. So these are, the way that I see it is just like they have more resources, better information to make decisions. And the immediate success of the team is not driving what they're picking, who they're picking, and why they're picking. And I feel like that changes the entire dynamic. Will they get them wrong sometimes? I think so. I mean, it's inevitable. You're not going to hit on every single pick. But I think what we've seen in the last 3 years, and you're already starting to see it with the 2022 draft, is that, they're more often than not, they're hitting. Yeah. And I think that's already a big thing, is that they're hitting. So they've reached a level of average, which is great. And now to really get to that above average, this is where the developmental staff has to go to work. And we'll see how that progresses over time.
Yeah, it's like the team, it's like Hughes and Gordon and their staff have kind of like said, what are all of, any area that we can gain an advantage at? Like, is it, and they've done all of these different things now, and they've moved away from some of the traditional approaches to hockey and some of the things that we've seen in past years. And I can tell you, I went to high school with Kent Hughes, and I went to law school with John Sedgwick. So I can tell you that both of those guys are people who don't leave too many stones unturned. And they, they're two guys who are pretty detail oriented, and guys who are, if they can, if there's a way that they can bring something in or do something new that's going to give the team an advantage, they're not going to get away from. There was an interesting podcast, I can't remember which one it was, where one of the players, it might have even been you that was talking about the idea that, there's teams in the league that don't have what the Montreal Canadiens have. There's teams in the league that don't have an arena that these guys can go to, that has a gym and has a trainer and has a nutritionist and has food for them. And they, there's teams that don't have that. A lot of teams that don't have that. And these guys, this is an advantage that the team can give these guys. And Adam Nicholas is allowed to be on the ice with these guys, whereas, Marty St. Louis technically isn't. And so, they've provided all of these advantage to these guys. If Ivan Demidov was playing for a lot of NHL teams, he probably, would have had to figure out his own way to train over the summer and rent some ice somewhere and find a gym and get his own trainer and so I think finding these advantages is one of the things that the team is doing right.
Yeah, no, definitely. And they've helped move along the medical staff as well. That was a huge problem
Yeah.
last season, a significant dip in the amount of injuries outside of the freak injuries we saw at the beginning of the season.
Yeah.
So I think that they've done a really good job of being able to blend out the rest of their, the back office, as I like to call it.
Yeah, 100%. And it's like I said, I think the moving away from some of the traditional approaches, whether it's I think the Canadiens were probably viewed as one of the more conservative organizations in the league and in previous regimes, and now they're pretty progressive as far as a lot of this stuff goes, whether it's on ice, off ice, in every aspect of the organization. So the last thing I'll touch on, and then I'll let you go because I know you're busy. And this is something that is probably a little closer to your heart. You kind of touched on a little bit at the beginning of the show. One of the other major changes I think the Canadiens have done is with respect to communication. The way they communicate with the media and the way they communicate with the fans. Like I just said, historically they've been a pretty conservative organization. They're pretty secretive. You weren't getting a lot of information out of them. I think that the addition of Chantal Machabée as the VP of Hockey Communications is one of the most astute, shrewd, whatever word you want to use, things that they've done. The more openness they are, the more available the players, management, coaches are. How has this change affected your ability to cover the team, and how is it like how does it fit into the rebuild? And I think it's very important. In sort of controlling expectations and the way they communicate, I think has been very, very, there's a lot of teams in the NHL that couldn't rebuild just because the fans wouldn't allow it, whether they're in a smaller market or a market that just won't go to games if the team is playing the way the Canadiens did for a couple years. So anyways, a long way, a roundabout way to get to the question is, how have you viewed the change in the way the Canadiens communicate from when you first started out to now?
Say it's a little bit more personable. I think it's a little bit more inviting and welcoming. I mean, they're always willing to listen to our ideas and get access to certain players. I think it's helped the players. I think it's helped us do our jobs. It's really about finding new ways to elevate the Canadiens in terms of their channels and whatnot. So, I won't steal their punches. They've got ideas coming up and obviously different pieces of media that they've come out with. You look at the Crave series and all that they've been able to do with the rebuild and so on and so forth. So definitely more of an openness in that. And, you look at those big markets. I don't think that there is a market in hockey that is allergic to rebuilds. Boston is probably the last stronghold before they finally have no choice but to dip into that. I just feel like ultimately in these kinds of situations, it's I wouldn't say it's easier in what they're doing, but I think that they've basically laid the seeds so that it becomes a little bit easier for other players, younger players in this game, to kind of come in and be able to hit the ground running.
Yeah. Would you agree with me that the rebuild would be a lot more difficult in a market like Montreal if they didn't have more open communications, if they communicated the way they did, sort of in the Bergevin or even going back before that in those regimes? Like, I think that the rebuild would have been a lot harder just because the fans the expectations would be a lot more out of whack with what the team was trying to do.
Yeah, I definitely think so. I think at a certain point in time, when you're in a rebuild, you need to maintain interest in the opportunity in the club, and obviously having the future, the hope of the team out there and available to fans, to media is a great way to do that. So, they had to do what they had to do, and I think they did it well in the moment. And I tip my hat to them, but I would say that, especially with communications, it's just it is such a difficult and daily grind. So you really have to be ready for whatever obstacle is thrown their way. We'll see how things look when the team is competitive. Obviously, I think that's going to change a whole lot of the dynamic. But I think enough headway has been done and enough goodwill has been planted amongst, between comms and media that, I think that things have changed for the better for sure.
Yeah, and I think as far getting back to the culture aspect of things too. I mean, the fact that the team now sort of encourages the players to show their personalities a little bit more, and they're get on social media, and I just find the interviews are a lot more. We get a pretty good feel for what Slavkovsky is like as a person. You only need to watch 30 seconds of an interview with that kid to know what he's like. We get a pretty good idea, and I think that goes. I think the players, it creates a more enjoyable environment for them when they're not viewing the media necessarily in an adversarial way. I mean, obviously, they're not going to tell everything, and they're smart enough to know that. But when they don't have to have their backs up all the time around the media, I think it allows them to relax a little bit more, and it sort of takes some of the stress and the pressure out of playing in a market like this. Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah. Anyways, Marco, it's been great. I appreciate it. I don't want to take any more of your time. I thank you so much for joining us. I love talking about this stuff, and I could talk about it all day. I suspect you probably could too. You just don't have the time to. Thanks so much for joining us, sharing your insight. I always appreciate it. Keep up your great work. Like I said, I really do appreciate your approach to reporting on the Canadiens, and I do enjoy it. And it is one of my go-to sources for Montreal Canadiens information. So thanks so much. And congratulations, by the way. I mean, it's kind of weird to congratulate somebody for, breaking a story, but the Demidov story I know probably was a big thing for you career-wise. And congratulations on that and some of the other stuff you've broken in the last few months as well. It's great to see you getting that success.
Yeah, thank you so much. And obviously, thanks for the invite. And we'll definitely be in touch soon. I wish all Canadiens fans watching a good start to the season, and we'll definitely be able to catch up on social media.
100%, and hopefully we'll get to do this again sometime.
Sounds like a plan.
Have a great day. Bye. So there you go, guys. Marco D'Amico, great conversation. Much thanks to him. Thank you guys for watching. Those of you that are here, thank you for the thumbs up. If you're not subscribed to the channel yet, please do so. Hit that notification bell. Help join our community. We do have some other nice, fun guests coming up in the next little while. We have going to have a guest in to speak about scouting, prospects, and the NCAA CHL rules. Somebody from a large podcast, somebody from a more national side of things. Hopefully we're going to have him on to speak to us next week sometime. But yeah, that was fantastic. I hope you did enjoy that. I love talking about some of the nerdy aspects of the rebuild and all of that stuff. And I hope you enjoyed it as well. If you're watching in a replay, please hit that thumbs up. Give us a thumbs up. Let us know that you like the show. If you have any feedback that you want to give us, anything that you think we could do better, certainly we're open to that as well. If you have any questions or comments, fire away. I'll do my best to answer them. I typically get around to answering everybody at some point. And finally, like I said, we're trying to grow a channel here, a community here, where we can have some smart, objective, intelligent conversation about hockey and the Montreal Canadiens. And if that's something you're interested in, then make sure you hit that subscribe button down below and join the Recliner Sports family and be a part of it all. So, merci beaucoup tout le monde. Thank you very much, everybody. We will definitely see you next time. Like I said, we've got some big guests coming up. And again, last time, thanks so much to Marco D'Amico for joining us, taking the time out of his very busy schedule to have a chat with us. So that's it for today, guys. I hope you did enjoy. I hope you did have fun, and we will see you next time. Peace out.
Pour un gars d'ici, être le directeur de général des Canadiens est une occasion d'une vie.
Enjoy the moment, that you're in the NHL here.
Working for the Montreal Canadiens is a dream. La plus grande franchise dans la histoire du hockey.
If it was my last day on this planet, and you told me, what would you like to do? We want to be in that building on a Saturday night.